I'll be discussing an article written in The Economist called Rising Power, Anxious State. This article discusses the state of the Chinese economy and the problems that it faces. China could be the world's largest economy in less than a decade. Last year, China was the world's largest manufacturer, displacing America from this position. China has had rapid recovery from the global financial crisis, and Chinese people are very proud of this. Diplomats often treat Western officials with condescension. Authoritarianism in China may have gained a new legitimacy because of this economic success. The Communist Party claims that socialism has allowed China to organize effectively, concentrate its resources, and accomplish large undertakings. The West is worried that the global balance of power is shifting towards China. Despite this growth, Chinese leaders are not eager to boast. They are worried about security at home and have revived a system of neighborhood surveillance, much like the system in Japan. Police have been arresting lawyers, NGO activists, bloggers, and even artists. The Chinese leadership is spooked by the Arab Revolution. For these reasons, China seems very vulnerable. Next year, the Communist Party will hold its 18th Congress, and there will be the biggest shuffle in China's leadership for a decade. A younger generation will take over the leadership. In the past, there has been unrest, dramatic events, and political coups when the leadership has changed. Despite the growth in China, the leadership will not have an easy job. The demographic advantage of abundant supply of labor in the countryside is starting to diminish. It will be difficult to maintain the rapid rate of urbanization that China has experienced. Economists think that China could fall into what is called the middle income gap. This means losing competitiveness in labor-intense industries while failing to find other sources of growth from innovation. It will be difficult to reorganize the economy so that growth is led by consumption and not by exports and investments. This will be hampered by state-owned enterprises, which still have great economic and political influence. The banks, which are still controlled by the government, are lending money to other parts of the state empire, which could revive a bad debt problem. China's embrace of globalization in recent years does not necessarily mean that there will be greater political freedom in China. The upcoming leaders in China are favoring a revival of Maoism. Liberals criticize these upcoming leaders for their disregard to legal process. The new leaders would prefer to steer the economy in a direction of greater state involvement. This has populist support, as many of China's business now pay little of their profits to the state. More state enterprises will be a detriment to competition and consumption as a source of economic growth. The increased power of state-owned enterprises and in turn the salaries of its employees could increase social tensions. The next part of the article is called Beware the Middle Income Gap. China has had long-term economic worries. Exports will be constrained due to Western economic problems. Returns from fixed assets will continue to diminish, and some experts worry that China could have the same problem as Japan. This would mean booming exports and investments with strong property markets, followed by many years of stagnation. The current 5-year plan calls for a faster change in the pattern of economic development and views increased consumption as important. The gap between the rich and the poor, between cities and the countryside, has been growing. Absolute poverty has dropped, but relative poverty has increased. The current 5-year plan, established in March, recognizes the troubled economic environments abroad and puts emphasis on domestic growth and consumption. The government plans to ramp up social spending and create affordable housing so that people can save less money and spend more. The government also plans to increase infrastructure spending with huge expansion of high-speed rail and airports. Some economists say that this is too much and that investments could be inefficient, which would lead to bad debt problems. China avoided the worldwide global recession because of their fixed income investments. These fixed investments could lead to staggering overcapacity and non-performing loan payment. There is now a possibility of a huge economic downturn. The article then talks about peasants in the countryside moving to the cities. There have been attempts to urbanize peasants. However, land reform has been unsuccessful and many peasants are taken advantage of by local officials when they sell parts of their land to developers. A survey now shows that peasants return to the countryside for retirement, which prevents permanent urbanization. State firms in China dominate in the industries that pay the highest salaries. The largest firms in China are state-owned. The state is tightening its grip on strategic industries like oil, coal, and telecommunications. The state tries to get a hold of any profitable enterprise. Stimulus spending is going to state-owned enterprises, which is basically the state lending money to the state. Economists are calling for interest rate reform on household deposits. Between 2001 and 2009, state-owned firms had high profits but low return on equity. Economists suggest that China should use these profits to lower the amount of workers have to pay on social insurance because this would increase the middle class. Another issue is that China is favoring Chinese technological innovation and shutting out foreign technological firms. China's population is seriously aging and the labor force will shrink considerably between 2012 and 2015. The political battle lines in China are between the universalists, who believe China must eventually move to democratic norms, and exceptionalists, who believe that China must preserve its authoritarianism. If the economy becomes weak in the coming years, China's leaders will be tempted to cater to nationalism and authoritarianism, which is favored by the exceptionalists. China is currently very hostile towards the West and is always on guard. People are wary of moving towards democracy because they are worried that the peasantry would make a mess of their economy. In the coming years, the middle class will become more demanding. I found this article very up to date, and I like the way that it addresses the issues with the Chinese economy, even when it's experiencing a time of prosperity and growth. I thought it was very in-depth and offered many examples of the concepts that it dealt with. I'll move on to my questions. The first one is, what are the similarities between the economic problems that caused the collapse of the Soviet Union and the economic problems that China faces today? My next question is, can a communist economy work in an increasingly globalized and capitalist world? My third question is, will China ever democratize the society? Does democracy fit in Chinese culture?